Great. So like I mentioned, today we are going to cover selling press releases and also using them as, part of your sales process and, for prospecting for new clients and things like that. This will be a much more interactive session than the last ones. We will cover, this in as much depth as you'd like. So, as we get to each slide, we'll pause for questions about that specific slide. And then at the end, we can cover anything else that we didn't touch on before. So with no further ado, let's jump right into how to use these for prospecting and sales. So these are just kind of a couple of ideas. We have a full downloadable PDF that has, a full-on sales letter and things like that you can use. But these are some of the things that we're seeing folks use, in a fairly, efficient and highly results-driven way. Let's say they get pretty good results out of these. And if you've got a solid prospect that you think is going to be worth a fair amount of money for you, a couple days before that sales call, issue a press release on their behalf, just talking about them, talking about how great their business is, and then you can kind of use that as part of that sales call and that sales demonstration to show that, hey, look, we can get you placement on places, we can get you visibility, we can get you publicity, we can help you with branding. It's obviously less SEO related because they're not necessarily going to understand the SEO benefits of it, but what it does is it really helps build your credibility in their eyes, that you can indeed deliver that. Similarly, if you send out a press release after a sales call, and you could say, hey, look, this is what we can do for you. You can be a little bit more picky that way. If they're interested, but they're still on the fence a little bit, you can kind of give them a little taste of what they can get. And then, another great thing that you can use to close out a deal is to offer a premium release for free. Normally you would charge $800 for this, but you'll give it to them for free, that first one, once they sign up with you. These are the types of things that you can use, especially those of you who are on this call are on our unlimited plan, so your per press release cost in volume gets pretty low, and so it becomes very effective to use these types of prospecting press releases and to use them to close the deal, so to speak. And then the other thing that you should certainly not sleep on is using them inside of your own agency. If you sign a big contract with a major client where people are going to recognize the name, send out a press release, right? Build your own brand. I know I've talked before about how prospects research your company when they try to decide who to do business with, and that's one of the angles that we like to use in order to sell press releases, right? Because we want that client to understand that, hey, look, if you're putting good quality press releases out, that really sets you out in front of the prospect in a way that your competition can't do, and so you look more legit and they're more likely to do business with you. Well, the same thing goes for you too in your agency, right? Similarly, the same way you would want to have good rankings and you'd want to have good testimonials and things like that, you also need to use press releases so people can see that, hey, look, we've got these news articles about you. And then you can leverage that too as part of your sales process and say, look, we're able to do this for ourselves. We can certainly do this for you too. People do get impressed by that, especially, in those, those ego verticals that we've talked about before, where they really love to see their name in lights. This is a game changer for those types of clients. So this is kind of the top 4 things that I like to use press releases for from a prospecting perspective. Another, you can use these general concepts in more creative ways too. Let's say you have a podcast and you want to land more, podcast guests. Well, send out a press release about every podcast guest that you have, and then you can use that as that pitch to those guests that you want to land to come on your podcast. That, hey, look, they're going to get some free press out of the deal. People are always looking for that sort of thing. So be creative with how you're using them, especially those of you, since you're on unlimited plans, that per unit cost is so much cheaper. You can really get some great value out of that. So questions about using press releases for, kind of that pre-sales side of things? Cool. Seeing no questions, we'll move on to the next one. If you come up with something along the way, we can certainly cover it at the end. Some general concepts in using press releases is, after the sale. So how you're selling press releases specifically to your customers. The first one is that press releases are high value commodity, right? Especially the premium press releases, Yahoo, MSN, those are big names that people don't necessarily know how to get onto. And so you can definitely leverage those big brands as part of that value setting for your overall offering, if you're using press releases in a way that's visible to your client. And since they're flexible, I would actually recommend using them both client facing and a little bit more under the radar, right? We'll talk about some of the different options here in a minute, but you can have some press releases that your clients have input on and that they see and that you share with them, and some that you don't. And where those might be the ones where you're doing some more kind of hardcore SEO stuff that your client's not going to understand and you don't want to explain to them. But it's super flexible, so we don't push one method onto you, of course, and so you can use that to to your advantage and have some nice visible press releases, maybe push those out to premium so that you get the big brand names, and then you can you can use some of the more generic press releases for keywords and for backlinks and stuff like that. The other thing that is just kind of that standard process, I would say, that you should do for every single client is that first press release you send out, bump it up to premium, and then send them a copy of the just send them a link to it on Yahoo, or on Yahoo Finance or something, MSN maybe, or both Yahoo and MSN. It gives you a tangible deliverable, and this is important because as we know, SEO results take time. And we may have 3-4 months where we're doing work for a client before they actually start seeing some significant results, because SERPs movement takes time. And if we can show them tangible things that you have done, like putting a press release onto Yahoo, they don't necessarily know how easy it was for you to do. All they know is that you did it, and it's something visible that you can show them, and you can say, hey, look, we are delivering you results. If you're on gold, this is even better, because every single one of your press releases goes onto msn.com. And so you're not incurring the extra fee of the premium. You just get that as part of your original package. And then don't sell these cheaply. Full retail for a press release today is north of $800. So don't sell these for $100, right? I mean, number one, you'd probably, depending on the plan you're on, you might be losing money on at $100. But if they have to go out and buy these for $800, especially if in some of these other strategies that we'll talk about in a minute, where it's more event focused, then why are you underselling? What they're going to wonder, well, shoot, if I go to PR Web or something and pay $800 for a press release, why are you only charging me $100 for that? What's wrong with your press releases? And then obviously, you should encourage people to have more recurring revenue towards you, and spend money with you consistently. And to do that, make sure that the a la carte releases, those one-offs, that those are more expensive than your recurring ones. Any questions after that? Okay, when I share premium and other press releases, I say those one premium and two normal PRs valued as $3,000. No, I think that's a good dollar amount, right? Because they aren't necessarily number one, if they call Cision or PR Web, they're going to get on a sales call and they are going to pitch them. If they go on to somebody like newswire.com, they're going to find it to be very expensive. You could the one problem that I would say with that $3,000 is that anchoring might be a little high. And then when you come in and say, I'm only charging you $300, they're going to wonder, well, why? So make sure that the difference between the value, prop that you're setting and the amount that you're charging, that the difference isn't too big. But generally speaking, if you think that a press release is generally available for about $800, that's going to be a pretty solid thing. I was looked on some of the marketplace sites where you can buy press releases, the one-off type stuff, and I even saw MSN placement for $1,000, which is worst case scenario you get for $150 if you're on a standard plan, and if you're on gold you get that automatically. So the value is certainly there to that end customer, and that's even bigger towards the end customer, because that $1,000 for the MSN post, the target audience for that is somebody who's an SEO consultant or an SEO agency, so they're going to mark that up again even more. So when you start looking at that kind of placement, $3,000, that's not too far off. So any other questions? Cool. All right, so the most basic type of method is what I call the a la carte add-on. It's something you can use with existing clients, new clients, whatever. And all this really is, hey, look, we can give you press releases, and here's the value, right? It's super straightforward. It's kind of an on-demand sort of thing, where you can pitch them, or they know that it's available, so that when they want one, they can come in and get one from you. Some of the downsides, the clients have a lot of visibility and input into the process, right? Because you're actually pitching them, hey, let's write a press release about you. So they're going to want to see it. They're going to want to have a lot of input. And sometimes that's good. A lot of times that can add some drag to the process. There's often lots of questions and explanation about press releases and what they are and what they aren't. You've heard me say this before, but a lot of clients, when you talk about press releases, they're going to think, well, great, I'm going to be in the New York Times. Well, you don't want them to think that, because that's not going to happen. Those reporters are not going to be knocking down their doorstep. So we want to make sure that they understand exactly what they're getting and what the benefits are. And as a result of that, these types of press releases tend to be a little bit less SEO focused and more along the lines of branding and reputation oriented, where, you're selling them on the branding value of getting those press releases out there, because explaining to them the SEO benefits of it is probably a little bit too much. We're getting a little bit too much into the education and the consulting side of things, as opposed to delivering a service, especially if we can deliver that commoditized / productized service that we want to for our, to make sure that our margins are solid. The upside is, obviously, you can get pretty good margins for this, right? You sell these for $250, $300, and let's say you're on one of our, like I think at 12 releases a month, you're paying about $115 a press release. Obviously, all of you are on unlimited plans, so yours are even cheaper than that. But let's say you're at $115, that's almost 300% if you're selling it at $300. So there's some pretty solid margin in there. Again, we talked about how press releases give you a tangible and high value deliverable that clients like. So this can be something that you can experiment with, especially with some existing clients, and just kind of pitching them. I have seen a lot of people having a hard time explaining to their clients what they want, and then the clients want to look and say, okay, what sites do these go on, and are these sites going to damage my reputation, and things like that. So it can be a bit of a harder sell. We don't have a lot of collateral to help you with that right now, but I'm certainly working through, building some of that collateral that will make it easier for you to sell that. But this is one of those things where, ideally they just kind of know that they can get it, and, you could reach out once in a while and see if they want to have one, but they know they can get a press release. So, if they want one, they can get one. Any questions about this type of upsell, if you will? Cool. We'll go on to the next one. Next one is similar. It's kind of an event-based upsell. So this is, an upsell around events that happen in the client business. They hired somebody, they made an acquisition, they added a new service line, they bought a new truck for their roofing business, those types of events, something that's announcement worthy. Has a lot of the same downsides as that previous upsell. It also adds a little bit of extra work, because you have to be aware of these events. Other events that could be relevant that you might be able to plan for is like promotions, or special partnerships, or they're going to be at this local conference, or they're going to be speaking at the local chamber of commerce. All of these types of things that you might know well ahead of time, so that you can announce these things ahead of time. Those are also great angles here. Upside wise, very similar upsides. You could potentially charge a little bit more for these, just because there is a little bit more effort and a little bit more value there. That said, it's a little bit easier to sell these, because now there's a concrete reason why the client should send out the press release, right? I'm speaking at the Chamber of Commerce. I'm going to send out a press release about that, right? I opened up a new store. I'm going to send out a press release about that. The way you find these is you're having a periodic check-in with that client. So, depending on your business, you might check in with that client every couple of weeks, maybe once a month, where you're talking to them and, getting updates, to them, that sort of thing. Maybe you're not, but, maybe you are. Ideally, you are. And that's the time when you talk about, anything that happened in the business that's notable, anything that's coming down the pipe that's noticeable. And then this is where you can say, well, you opened a new store. Why don't we send out a press release about it? It'll cost you this much, and this is what you'll get out of that. So this is a really, kind of convenient way to add some additional revenue, to upsell, that client into another press release that's going to, again, help with credibility. It's going to help with branding. It'll certainly help with SEO, but again, it's also going to boost your credibility in their eyes because you can get them placements in these news outlets. Questions about this? All right, now we're on to stuff that's more recurring basis. So we're going to call it a line item deliverable. So you might do it monthly, you might have more than one a month, you might do it quarterly, but it's going to be part of your standard offering. And this is for those of you who, instead of saying, here's an all-inclusive package, this is where you're kind of line iteming out what you're delivering to, for folks. You can still kind of, bake it in, so to speak. We'll talk about that in a minute. But if you're going to line item everything out, you still have some of the, some of the same issues with, the clients are aware of them. So there's a lot of visibility and they may want input. There's going to be some questions and explanations. And then a lot of times, if you're sending out regular press releases that they know about, they're going to want to have client approval before sending out the release, which can kind of drag the process down pretty bad. So you want to be careful that you're knowing what you're getting into with that. Again, good margins though, right? You'll see that as a pretty common theme, right? Your good margins are there. You sell that $125 press release for $300 every single time, like clockwork. It can be more SEO focused since it is a core part of your offering. It's a core part of your strategy. So now you're building in all the SEO elements of it, and you're focused less on the branding and much more on the SEO benefits of it. And obviously, as a recurring line item, it is a recurring profit center. So this should really be the minimum goal that you want to reach, recurring releases that you're charging for, that you're making money for on a regular basis. One downside that I didn't put in here is this can kind of lock you in, and we'll talk about why that's not the best bet in a minute. But it can kind of lock you into sending out a certain number of press releases every month. And, I do recommend that you not do that because, you'll be able to, build out your budget a little bit better and you increase your margins down the road, and which we'll talk about in the next slide. But any questions about this sort of thing? Cool. Oh, one more. With more visible clients, it would be nice to have an option to change the auto-approve settings per organization instead of globally. I agree, it would. We have some technical limitations as to why we can't do that right now. My new developer started today, however, so we should be able to start getting some of these things, kind of nailed down. Mary, when I say it gets you locked in, what that means is if you're, as part of your offering, you're presenting this is what we're going to do for you every month. We're going to send 2 press releases for you every month. 6 months down the road, you may not need to send 2 press releases every month because you're not getting that benefit anymore. Because if you remember from one of our earlier sessions, one of my recommendations is that you're doing those 2 press releases a month for 3, maybe 6 months, and then you back off to 1 every 6 weeks. Start at 1 a month for a couple months and then back off to 1 every 6 weeks. Well, if you're billing, if you told them you're doing 2 a month like clockwork, you have to keep doing 2 a month like clockwork, and that's a problem, right? Because now you're using press releases that you've paid for as part of your agency. You don't need to use them for this client anymore, but you've committed to doing that, which is why I like the next model better, which we'll just jump into right now. So that next model is bake it into the cake, right? Put the press releases into the overall package without the detail to the client. If you're still line iteming things out, use it as part of your budget for link building, for example. don't call out the press releases, or at least the specific numbers of press releases, in the bid, so to speak, in that breakdown of what you're going to give them. Some downsides to that is some clients don't like the here's the whole thing, I'm not going to show you how we did it model. And it also won't work for all client verticals, because some verticals are really restricted as far as what they can do press wise. They may they may require review, and you'll know that if you're working in one of those clients. But the best upside to this is what I was just talking about. Those margins improve over time, because if you're charging them, so for 2 press release, let's say you're charging them $500 a month for that as part of your link building package, and it's not called out as press releases. Well, in 6 months, when you're doing one every six weeks, now that's one press release every what, 2 months essentially, billing wise. And so now that $500, instead of having an overhead of what, $200, with a $300 margin, now you're spending $100, and you've got like an $800 margin on that, $700-800. So your margins improve naturally over time as you have delivered what you've told them. Obviously, if you're using press releases as part of a recurring brand and reputation management strategy, you're going to need to keep using them. But if you're using them for brand and reputation management, that's where I talk, if you remember before, I talk about using both methods, right? Use some for SEO. These are the ones you can charge for and back off on. And then you're using some for branding and reputation. Those ones are visible, and you just charge them as a regular line item. So you can kind of mix and match, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Recurring profits, and since these are kind of under the radar a little bit more, you get far fewer client questions and need for explanation. And in my mind, this is the best model to be in, especially because you can improve your margin over time. If you're the ability to take that one line item for link building and get an extra $400 or $500 a month in profit out of that should not be underestimated. That's a pretty decent amount for a given client, especially if you're charging them $3-4 grand a month. That $500 is a decent chunk of change from a profit perspective. Any questions about this? And then the final model here is just an all of the above type model. You pick a recurring model, whether it's a line item or a bake into the cake model, and you add on an upsell type of model. And you can even mix and match upsell models too. So you might use the bake into cake as the base model, and then every month when you're doing that client meeting, see if there's an event release that they would want to send out, right? Upsell. And then the other model that I really like is bake it into the cake for SEO purposes, and then use a line item deliverable, which is still recurring, and use that to get some of that brand and reputation management releases out there that are a little bit more visible to the client and don't have necessarily all the SEO bells and whistles. These things are really good margin, especially if you're pushing out volume across your entire account, right? The more press releases you use for your agency across the board, the better price you get, and so your margin gets much better. And it's a margin game, right? If you're overall at a 35% margin on a client, you could easily get another 5% margin, and going from 35 to 40% margin can be a big deal when you're talking about 10, 15, 30 clients. So look for not just press releases, but look for other places where you can kind of scratch out that improved margin as well. So questions about kind of packaging these all together? Excellent. Okay, that's all I have today. These are kind of the top models that we see people using press releases successfully in their business. There are other ways. Some of them are highly technical. Some of them are frankly not as successful. But these models that we've just gone over, these are the models that are seeing success and being efficiently used over and over and over again. And so these are the ones that we recommend to you that you start with. At least you can certainly put your own spins on things, and you can come up with hybrid models and things like that. And everybody operates their business a little bit differently, but hopefully this will give you some ideas on how you can effectively sell these to clients in a way that not just makes sense from a financial perspective, but also maybe reduces some of the work that you have to do for delivery. So any final questions before we wrap up for the day? Mary, I've actually thought about that. That's another thing people have kind of been talking to me about. And the question is whether there's other Press Advantage users to hear and talk to. I've thought about putting together some sort of a kind of a community area where people can talk to each other and share strategies that they are willing to share, and see what's working now versus what isn't, and that sort of thing. I don't know what that would look like. I'm not really a Facebook guy, so I don't know that I'd want to do a Facebook group. I know that Semantic Mastery just moved all their stuff to Circle, I think it's called, and they seem to like that. I may talk to Adam or Bradley and see how that experience has been with them. But then there's other people as well that school, I think, is another one, but that's maybe more course related. So I know there's options out there, so we'll kind of take a look. But I do think that there's a lot of interest in that sort of sharing space, if you will. Bradley Benner does, is your follow-up question about YouTube. Bradley Benner does talk about using press releases on the Hump Day Hangouts from time to time, so you can look him up on YouTube. And he certainly shares a lot of his strategies. He's using them a lot more for branding as opposed to SEO right now. Because he's finding, branding an easier, frontline sale, just overall, as opposed to selling SEO, which I think you will probably all run into as you work through your agencies. So he's the only, I think, Ted over at SEO Fight Club, they talk about it a little bit every once in a while. I know Lee Witcher was on there, and he told me the other day that he was talking about press releases as well, but a lot of it is just kind of almost tribal knowledge, where people will share in little groups, and so I think having a group internal where we can kind of share things around and kind of talk about what's working, what's not, so it's not just me kind of regurgitating and trying not to step on anyone's toes and share information that I shouldn't share or anything like that. It's much better if it can be kind of peer-to-peer. So I do think that's something I'd like to do. I just don't know what that looks like yet. Justin says, how many links or backlinks do we need to add for each press release URL? Justin, I'm not quite sure what you're asking there. Could you clarify for me? While I wait for Justin to answer that question, I'll go through these other questions here. In the near future, will there be another chance for the gold plan? I want to switch to the gold plan when possible. Yeah, I do think that here in another month or so, we're going to open up the unlimited package for a couple of days. We have had, unfortunately, a couple cancellations, and so we do have some slots available, and I do know that there's a lot of demand for them. So I will certainly let you guys know if you'll see our emails and such, so it'll be pretty straightforward. Mary, his name is Bradley Benner, Benner, and he's with Semantic Mastery. The website or the YouTube channel is Semantic Mastery's YouTube channel, and every Wednesday they do this thing called Hump Day Hangouts, where Bradley and sometimes a few other guys will just get on there and they'll just talk about SEO and answer questions and stuff like that. So they will occasionally talk about press releases because Bradley uses our stuff, and I was actually on one. They interviewed me for one a couple months ago, so it's a neat little show. Still waiting for you to clarify, Justin, on that question. Oh, there we go. How many? So I'm going to assume that when you say one press release URL, you're talking about one press release itself. So I recommend 2 links per press release. It's one of those things where you can go up to 3 without causing too many issues. Much more than 3, it starts looking a little spammy, and less than 3, or less than 2, down to 1, you could probably, get a little bit more value out of using 2. I hope that helps. If it doesn't, Justin, feel free to email and ask the question. I can, certainly get into a little bit more detail there. Greg says, your podcast example was excellent. I'm doing my book launch later this year and booking my podcast interviews for my book, including a press release for each of the podcast interviews could be a cool incentive to attract interviews, as well as getting those podcast backlinks boosted. Yeah, absolutely, Greg. It really goes to, the idea of using press releases not just for client work, but also for your own branding, because, branding yourself and branding your own agency and, getting your name out there in the appropriate context is going to be just as beneficial, if not more so, for you than it is for your clients, because you're going to be able to help a lot more people if they know about you. So cool. Any other final questions? Justin says, one more question. These links should include on that specific page or homepage. I recommend that you don't always do homepage links. Most of the time you'll get a homepage link for free in the footer of the press release, but not all of the release pickups will hyperlink that link. So you could certainly do that once in a while in the body. Usually in the body, I like to link to content that's relevant. So if it's a press release about a blog post or a case study, we're going to link to the blog post or case study. If it's about a new service or a new location or something like that, we're going to link to the page that is relevant for that. We're really focusing on relevancy, and we're going to depend on the homepage links in the footer, and potentially also through other means. Well, fantastic. Well, once again, I thank you all for your attention. Let's see, what are we talking about next week? Let me look. So I think next week we are going to talk about best practices by vertical. So that'll be fun, because we'll go into how to use them for e-com, how to use them for local, how to use them for product launches, how are we going to use them for branding campaigns? Are there any specific verticals where like what if we are working in say supplements where it's a little dicier, or what if we're working in in medical where we have specific things that we can and can't say. So we'll really kind of dive into that. If there's any verticals that you'd like to make sure that I cover, please send me an email and let me know. And if you don't have my email handy, then you can certainly reach out to support, and they would be happy to pass that on to me. But I'd love to know what verticals are important to you, and that can be either a kind of a class, or also something like, well, what happens if I'm working in Los Angeles instead of Timbuktu? And we can certainly go over any of that. So anything vertical related, whether it's a niche or geography or size of business or any of that stuff, definitely go ahead and let me know what's going to be interesting to you, and we will kind of go from there. So should be a pretty fun one, and I look forward to seeing you guys then. Thanks again for your attention today. And if there's any other questions that we missed, feel free to send me an email or reach out to support. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.